Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to yet another episode from The Draw Step. Today, we have a deck build that is so disgusting, so ridiculously overpowered that when your opponents see it, they're probably not even going to want to play against you. So I can't promise that you'll always be able to play this deck, but what I can promise is that when you play this deck, you're always going to win. It's that ridiculously powerful. So, who's the commander for the deck? Today we are working with Maha, it's Feathers Knight. If you're not familiar, it's 5 mana. It's a 6/5 elemental bird with flying, trample, ward, discard a card, because it needed that, I guess. And its ability is creatures your opponents control have base toughness 1. So this is my version of the card, and two things I want to get off, acknowledge right off the rip. First of all, yes, this is the extended art of the card. And secondly, yes, my version does look like crap, because like a freaking goober, I washed a $25 card in my laundry. Yeah, that was depressing. But what's not depressing is how many times I've beaten my friends with this deck. So let's get into it. All right, starting things off, we have 33 basic swamps. This is a mono black deck. Don't overthink it. I know there's some pretty great non-basic lands out there. Not super necessary for this deck. 33 swamps will get the job done. I do have 2 non-basics though. The first one is the Dross Pit, so if later in the game you need to sack it to get a card, you have the ability to do that. And then the other one is Spy Master's Vault, which gives a creature the ability to connive, so again you can make a creature stronger, fill your graveyard depending on what you need, again a little bit later in the game. Now as far as ramping goes, we'll get into our artifacts next. We have Wayfarer's Bauble, classic. Soul Ring, again, classic. I'm of the opinion that every deck should have a Soul Ring. Command Sphere with the fancy art from, I think that's Foundations that came from? Or Command Masters, I can't remember. Anyway, it looks cool. And then the last bit of ramp we have is Gilded Lotus, which will give you 3 black every time you tap it. So those are our ramp pieces. I guess the one other piece of ramp, and this does fall into an enchantment, is Black Market. Whenever a creature dies, put a charge counter on Black Market, and at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add 1 black for each charge counter on Black Market. So this is ridiculous. Your opponents, their creatures are going to be dying so quickly. Because even if they have a giant dinosaur, like some 12/12 creature, as soon as Maha touches the battlefield, that's now a 12/1 creature. And the amount of cards that we have in this deck that do 1 damage, it's ridiculous. So, you are going to be having a ton of creatures. Well, not you. Obviously not you. You're cool. You're winning. Your opponents, though, are going to have a lot of creatures dying. So every time those creatures die, you add more charge counters on this, and this is going to be able to produce quite a bit of mana for you. Last, as far as our artifacts go, we have Bone Horde, which is an artifact equipment. It is a living weapon, so it can be a strong creature in and of itself, or you can attach it to your commander or whoever you want to do just to finish off an opponent with damage, because they're probably not going to have anything to block with. Living weapon and equipped creature gets +X/+X, where X is the number of creature cards. Do you mind? Is the number of creature cards in all graveyards. Again, we are going to be taking out all of our opponent's creatures. So that is going to get pretty large pretty quickly. Now these last 2 pieces are just value pieces, because as we're taking out all of our opponent's creatures, great, that does weaken their board state, but we want to be getting something out of it. So the first one, and this is kind of an odd one, Dingus Staff. I'm sure you probably Don't play a Dingus Staff in most of your decks, but you're going to want one in this deck because whenever a creature is put into any graveyard from play, Dingus Staff deals 2 damage to that creature's controller. So, oh, I dropped it. Anyway, hopefully you saw that. Yes, it can technically do damage to you, but you are going to have far fewer creatures dying than your opponents are going to be having creatures dying. They're going to be losing a lot more. So every time one of their creatures dies, pings them for another 2. That's going to add up quickly. And last but not least, for our artifacts, we have Portal to Phyrexia. This is a big boy. 9 mana. Is going to be expensive to get down, but the value from this is ridiculous. You could put this in a lot of decks and it would be a very powerful card, but the synergy with this deck is insane. So Portal to Phyrexia says, when it enters a battlefield, each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures. That's great in and of itself, especially if they're playing with non-token creatures, if it's not like a token deck or something like that, and they're forced to get rid of good pieces. That is big. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It's a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. Now, that part doesn't matter as much, the whole it becoming a Phyrexian, cool, whatever. What's big is that now anytime your opponents try getting ahead, anytime they try putting a creature onto the battlefield, you are going to kill it like that. It's going to go to their graveyard, and then you can just pick all of their best stuff and bring it over to your side. That's nutty. That is insane, the value you're getting there. Speaking of value, we have 2 Planeswalkers in this deck, and both of them are Lilianas. The first one is Liliana of the Dark Realm. This is a classic. It's a little pricey. I mean, if you have a cheaper card or just another ramp piece or whatever, you certainly can replace it with that. I know it's a little pricier, but Liliana of the Dark Realms. +1, search your library for a swamp, reveal, put in your hand, shuffle. Nice little, not necessarily ramp, but it does make sure that you hit all of your land drops. -3, target creature gets +X or -X until end of turn where X is the number of swamps you control. And then the ultimate gives you an emblem with swamps you control, tap for 4 black. That is ridiculous. That is insane. If you have the ability to get that to its ultimate, which is -6, so you only need to hit it 3 times. If you have the ability to do that, it's pretty much GG's for your opponents because you're going to have so many swamps out and they are now tapping for quadruple mana. They are cooked. There's not much they're going to be able to do there. And then the other Liliana we have is Liliana Death Mage, which this is really great value piece here. +1, return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. That is amazing. If your opponents do manage to take care of one of your pieces, you're able to just bring it right back and recast it. -3, destroy target creature. Its controller loses 2 life. That's pretty solid as well. If there's a creature that they have that they've found some way to buff, or you just can't take out, or your commander isn't on the battlefield yet, there's some nice spot removal. And then the ultimate, which is a -7, target opponent loses 2 life for each creature card in their graveyard. Again, we are filling our opponent's graveyards with their creatures. It is going to be very, very hard for our opponents to keep creatures on the battlefield with this deck. So all of them going straight to the graveyard, that is going to rack up the amount of damage that is being done to them right there. All right. Next, our enchantments. This one is insane. Noxious Field, 3 mana, 1 colorless, 2 black. Enchanted land has tap. This land deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. Yes, this is technically doing damage to you as well. If you have like a 1/1 creature out, yeah, it's going to kill that. But that is a board wipe. Every time you tap a swamp, it is a board wipe against your opponents. The value is insane. You tap that once a turn, and your opponents are just done. Like, they cannot build a board. I can't stress enough how ridiculously toxic this is. Next, again, speaking of not being able to build a board, Knight of Souls Betrayal. all creatures get -1/-1. You have this in place and your commander in place, your opponents cannot lay creatures. The second it hits the battlefield, its toughness is reduced to 1, and then it sees that enchantment, all creatures get -1/-1, done. They're done. They're off the battlefield. Same thing with Curse of Death's Hold, enchant player, and then creatures enchanted player controlled get -1/-1. So this is a little bit more targeted. You can put it on somebody that you view as like the biggest threat or whatever, and they will not be able to lay creatures. It's pretty toxic. Next, we have Pestilence. It's 4 mana, and it does say at the end of any turn, if there are no creatures in play, bury Pestilence, which is just very old for, destroy it, send it to your graveyard, whatever. But it has pay one black mana, Pestilence deals 1 damage to all creatures and players. So that, again, is a nice little way for 1 mana, take out all of your opponent's creatures, just quick board wipe. Meathook Massacre 2, because the first one wasn't horrendous enough as far as toxically powerful. They made a second one. So it's XX and then 4 black. When Meathook Massacre the second enters, each player sacrifices X creatures. Whenever a creature you control dies, you may pay 3 life. If you do, return that card under your control with a finality counter on it. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, they may pay 3 life. If they don't, return that card under your control with a finality counter on it. That's ridiculous value. That is insane. Again, if your opponents, if you're set up right, you have your commander out, you have that enchantment out, as soon as a creature hits the battlefield, it's going straight to the graveyard, and now they have to choose to either pay 3 life or it's yours. So they're just casting stuff for you. Ridiculous. Virtue of Persistence. This, again, is along the same line. It has an adventure. It's a sorcery. You can pay 2. Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. You gain 2 life. Cool. Going to take out one of your opponent's creatures. And then an enchantment for 7 mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. I can't stress this enough. If you're not picking up what I'm putting down, the value here is insane. All of your opponent's creatures, they either will not be able to play them, or if they do play them, they are going to be going straight to the battlefield, and then from the battlefield to the graveyard, and then you'll have the ability to, at your upkeep, choose the best of them, put them on the battlefield under your control. Now, these final 3 enchantments are more about finishing off the game. So the first one, Grievous Wound. Enchanted player can't gain life, and when an enchanted player is dealt damage, they lose half their life rounded up. So this, especially early on in the game, just chewing through your opponents. They can't block you. You could hit them with a 1/1, and there goes 20 life, which is insane. Wound Reflection. At the beginning of each end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life they lost this turn. So if you have these 2 enchantments in play, you hit them, again with a 1/1, they lose half their life. Then Wound Reflection triggers, they lose the other half of their life. GG's. Last for our enchantments, we have Warlock class. 1 delay at the beginning of your end step. If a creature died this turn, each opponent loses 1 life. That's going to be happening all the time because, again, your opponents are going to be losing all their creatures. Level 2. When this class becomes level 2, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 of them into your hand, the rest into your graveyard. Cool. A little bit of rummaging, I guess, searching through, trying to find the cards you need to finish off the game. And then for 7 mana, you can go to level 3, and at the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life they lost this turn. Again, just another version of Wound Reflection. Cool! All right. Sorceries and instants. These, we are going to breeze through them because they're all basically the same thing, and they're all pretty toxic. 3 mana, Gruesome, Realization. You can either draw 2 cards and lose 2 life, or creatures your opponent's control get -1/-1. I do like this one for the flexibility because, yes, it's either a board wipe for 3 mana, or it gives you some cards depending on what you need. Another 3 mana, Seeker's Folly. Target opponent discards 2 cards, or creatures your opponent's control get -1/-1 until end of turn. 3 mana board wipes are just insane. It's ridiculous, and actually gets more ridiculous once we get to the instance, but still. Let's play a game. Creature for 4 mana, you can either do creatures your opponent's control get -1/-1 till end of turn. Hopefully you're sensing a theme here. Or each opponent discards 2 cards, or each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. So again, some flexibility, and there is the Delirium in there as well too. So if you hit that, you can get all of them. Mephitic Vapors. I don't even know if I pronounced that right, but again, 3 mana for a -1/-1 to all of your opponent's creatures. Feed the Swarm. If they have a enchantment or something laying around that's causing you some problems or is going to become a threat, hit that with Feed the Swarm. You're good to go. Rush of Dread. This is a nice spree spell, so it gives you the ability to choose what you really need. You can either get rid of creatures, cards, or half their life, which again, paired with like a Wound Reflection, that's a game over combo right there. Sanguine Indulgence. Return 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. So if your opponents find a way to take care of some of your value pieces that you have on the board, well, shoot, you can just get them right back. Same with Zombify. Get a creature back from your graveyard to your hand. And these 2 pieces, again, comboed with like a Wound Reflection or what have you, can be game enders. The first one is Damnable Pact, X, and then Swamp. Target player draws X cards and loses X life. Now, you can do this yourself if you're trying to draw into a piece that you need to win the game. You do have the ability to do that, or later on in the game, you can use it to just burn out an opponent. And then last but not least, we have Sanguinate. Sorcery, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life equal to the life lost this way, which actually combos with a few different things, but again, can be a game ender right there. Alrighty, moving right along. We have our instance, starting out, the Corrupted Conviction. This is draw 2 cards, again, just trying to get into the pieces that we need to either win the game or shut down our opponents. Withering Torment, again, nice little piece to destroy an enchantment if need be. Now, your opponents, I'm going to be very upfront with you. Your opponents are not going to like this deck, and they're going to want to try to destroy your commander as quickly as possible. So we have some ways to protect our commander. First, Fake Your Own Death. Then Undying Malice, which again gives it some pseudo protection there. And last but not least, Professor's Warning. So those are 3 different ways where if they hit you with either like a board wipe or a targeted destruction, you can give your commander indestructible or whatever it may be just to keep them alive for another turn. Then we have for 2 mana, target creature gets -2/-2, so basically destroy a creature for 2 mana. For 1 mana, we have Skullduggery. Skullduggery? I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't know if you've noticed this yet in my videos, but I am not an expert at pronouncing cards. I'm just an expert at making disgusting decks. You gotta pick one, you know? Anyway, 1 mana board wipe. Gives the target creature, well, not board wipe, 1 mana, target opponent, wow. Target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1, so it is going to destroy that creature for 1 mana. For 3 mana, creatures your opponent's control get -1/-1. That's a board wipe. That's board wipe. Got that one right. And then Stab, target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. And Cower in Fear, creatures your opponent's control get -1/-1. So again, we have enchantments that can take out all of our opponent's creatures. We have 3 mana instants and sorceries we can lay that are going to take out all of our opponent's creatures. It's ridiculous. And if that wasn't ridiculous enough, we have creatures that can do the same thing. First, Nightclubber. When Nightclubber enters the battlefield, creatures your opponent's control get -1/-1. Massacre Wurm. This one is ridiculous value. So it's 6 mana, it's a 6/5. Whenever this creature enters, creatures your opponent's control get -2/-2 until end of turn. take out their boards, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. You get this onto the battlefield, and then you hit them with a board wipe, or you have anything else in play. Every time the creature dies, it is burning out your opponents. They are going to find it very hard to build up a board or even stay alive as soon as this is in play. Doomwake Giant, when it enters or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn. Nice little board wipe there. Kaverick the Spiteful, other creatures get -1/-1. Now, to be fair, this does hit your creatures too, so it is going to weaken all of your stuff, but most of these creatures are pretty good size, so they can survive being -1/-1. Your opponent's creatures, they cannot. They're done for. Blight Beetle. Creatures your opponents control cannot get +1/+1 counters on them. We do not want them buffing their creatures. We do not want them finding ways to survive our cheap board wipes, okay? If they're on the battlefield, they deserve to die. That's foul. But this allows that to happen. Harvester of Misery. When it enters the battlefield, other creatures get -2/-2. Same as the Worm, just with less upside. So, Plague Mare. When it enters the battlefield, creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn. So again, these are all just creatures with board wipes built into them. Shambling Ghost. When it dies, choose one. Target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Not the strongest, but it's only 1 mana. It works. And then last but not least, we have Ascendant Evincer. Other black creatures get +1/+1. Non-black creatures get -1/-1. So the one thing with this is it does buff your whole team. You are getting stronger there. However, if your opponents do have black creatures, it is going to make them stronger because it gives them that buff on top of their 1 toughness. So that can make it a little harder to destroy. But all other non-black creatures, which is most, it's going to take them out. So a little bit of a give and take there. These are some really strong, again, game-ending pieces here. Marauding Blood Priest. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses life. And then Blood Artist. Whenever it or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. That can really pair well with some of these. Again, especially Blood Artist, that's ridiculous. Every time your opponent's creatures die, kind of going back to the Worm, it's just burning them out. So doing some damage there. Diamond Mare. As this creature enters, choose a color. Whenever you cast a spell of the chosen color, you gain 1 life. Believe it or not, we're going to choose black as our color. Kind of makes sense. Vengeful Blood Witch. When this creature or another creature you control dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. That is pretty similar to the Marauding Blood Priest or the Blood Artist, except Blood Artist is all creatures. This one specifies it's only your creatures, but still nice value there. Veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life, and it can give all of your creatures lifelink. Your opponents aren't going to have any creatures to block. You can get in, get that damage, get that lifelink, take out your opponents. And then last, we have Enduring Tenacity. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. Kind of same as Veto right there. Now we got just some value pieces. Rune-Scarred Demon. When it enters, search your library for a card, put it in your hand and shuffle. If, again, looking for whatever you need to get that game-winning combo there. Valgavoth's Faithful. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. You can sacrifice it to do that. So if there is something that you're wanting, like your Blood Artist or whatever, and it gets destroyed, you can bring it right back. Overseer of the Dam. When it enters the battlefield, you may destroy target creature. Whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. This is, again, giving you great value for taking out your opponent's creatures, because this deck is really built on 2 things. 1, obviously, taking out your opponent's creatures, and then 2, getting value for all of those creatures dying. Sire Conrad the Grim, whenever another creature dies or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. So every time creature dies, doing 1 damage to your opponents. And Night of Dusk Shadows. Your opponents can't gain life. This will prevent even the life gain players. You have this in play, you drain them out, they can't do anything about it. Blood Vial Purveyor, again, just good value, a nice piece to get in, attack your opponents with the flying, they can't block it, you're going to take them out. Lorcan Warlock Collector, whenever a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere, you may pay life equal to its mana value. If you do put it on the battlefield and you control its Warlock. Again, just another way of getting the creatures from your opponents, putting their best stuff onto the battlefield. Vampire Soul Caller. Whenever this creature enters, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Nice little piece to, get back something you lost. Or in this case, Violent Tumor. Whenever or when this creature enters, search your library for a card, put that card in your graveyard, then shuffle. So you can use this to go tutor for, a big creature that you want, or your Blood Artist or what have you, and then use like the Vampire Soul Caller to bring it back to your hand. And then last but not least, we have Vault Plunder. Enters the battlefield, target player draws a card and loses 1 life. Probably going to be you just to get some card draw there. So that is the deck. That is one terrifyingly powerful deck. You are nerfing your opponents entirely. They are going to find it just about impossible to get a board built up unless they deal with your commander, and that's why we have so many ways to try and protect our commander as well too. And you are going to win a lot of games with this deck and make a lot of enemies with this deck as well too. This is kind of a thing on this channel. We make some pretty toxic decks, but decks that you are definitely going to enjoy playing. So if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, like, subscribe, and we are going to have another video. It's going to pop up, right there, and another deck build. And I think you're gonna want to watch that, see some other of the toxic decks we built. Anyway, we'll see you next time.